When I fell asleep, it was like a curtain dropping on my mind. My mind shut off, my body collapsed, I smacked my head, I go back up again. The darkness came and my consciousness maintained. What was in front of me wasn't the mountain, was this expanse of darkness. Far in the distance, a single star appeared, came rushing toward me, and it communicated to me, download of information, I'm taking you, and it reached inside of me and took me. I looked to myself to be made of light. I was an eye of God, seeing myself inside this entity. I was inside of all of the people I hurt in my life, and I experienced suffering that I gave to them with intention, and it was like a barrier of shame. And the voice said to me, in the way that I love you, I love every single person in the same way. Everything unfolds back into me. My human identity had nothing to do with the true me. And the voice commanded me, choose. And so I said, if I go back, can I come back here, this bliss and heaven? And the voice said, long time ago, in 1980, I was ice climbing in Western Canada in March, made a mistake, and that mistake cascaded into advanced and severe hypothermia, which eventually killed me. I was at the very end of my life. I accepted what was happening to me. I couldn't climb up and I couldn't climb down. The cold was deepening moment by moment. I found myself surrendering to my circumstance, accepting what was happening to me, and beginning to fall asleep. I would fall. When I fell asleep, I was harnessed into the mountain at this point, about 150 feet up, hours before dawn. The day after we had begun our climb, which was only supposed to last about 6 hours. And my partner was to my left. He was in the same situation that I was. I had the rope. It was tied to my harness that was around my waist, and it was one end of it was tossed up and around the corner of a mountain crag. I'd been pulling on it. It had stuck up there, and so we couldn't go up and we couldn't go down. My chest became hot suddenly, and so I unzipped my coat, which is not what you do, but hypothermic people do. I felt like all of the heat was rushing from my limbs into my chest, and I began to sweat. And I thought to myself that I don't need my hands or my feet to survive. I need my heart and my brains and my lungs. And so I was content with this circumstance, but unzipping my coat made the cold come faster. And I realized that I was going to die and I wasn't going to get out of this. So I surrendered to it. And this peace replaced my terror and drive to survive. And I began to fall asleep. And when I fall asleep, I'd collapse to the rock and smack my helmeted head, wake back up immediately from the shock of it, and stand back up and pull the rope again. And this repeated several times. And then I stood up this last time, and there was this big black circle around my peripheral vision, which collapsed rapidly. And as it collapsed to this narrow beam of vision, I thought to myself, I must be falling asleep. And I waited and it went to blackness, only I didn't fall asleep. Previously, when I fell asleep, it was like a curtain dropping on my mind. My mind shut off, my body collapsed, I smacked my head, I go back up again. But this time, the darkness came and my consciousness maintained. And I was confused about why I no longer felt pain. And what was in front of me wasn't the mountain, was this expanse of darkness that extended, I couldn't see how far. And I wondered what was going on. And as I looked far in the distance, a single star appeared. And this single star in this velvet blackness came rushing toward me. And as it came toward me, it expanded inside to my vision, and it communicated to me without language, telepathically, like a download of information. I'm taking you. And it reached inside of me and took me. I resisted its taking me, but it was way more powerful than me. My near-death experience story is long, and I'll make it as tight as I can. Superposition is part of my experience. Paradox and timelessness and ineffability, unspeakableness. So I talk in metaphor and simile. I was superpositioned. I was inside this entity rushing back up on the path that it took me, and I had no agency. I had no power to do anything. It was speaking inside of me. It was giving me comfort, speaking intelligence to me, super intelligence, super comfort. And I had a form, and my form was human ish, but I had no molecules. I looked to myself to be made of light. I was inside of this container traveling upward, and I could see through this transparent intelligence, and itself was superpositioned. It was a reduction of a much greater force, understanding infinite knowledge that I knew was speaking to me through it. It was somehow a reduction of this larger infinite communication, and I was superpositioned. I was not only inside of this entity traveling back up this path that it had taken to collect me, I was outside. I was an eye of God, an eye of the divine, seeing myself inside this entity. But when I looked from inside, I couldn't see that part of me. But I could see me seeing that. Simultaneous, 2 points of view. And it rushed me back up this trajectory, and it reached an edge of some kind, and then it unfolded, or I popped out of, and I was inside of a much larger darkness. And this darkness was the size of the universe, and I was the only thing inside of it, but I had no molecules. I wasn't a thing. I wasn't made of energy or electromagnetism. I was something else altogether that is no thing. I can't describe it to you, but it was my intelligence, my consciousness, my feeling and my thinking, but not my human identity. My human identity had nothing to do with the true me. And I knew myself in a way that I was remembering who I had always been and who I had forgotten when I was this other human thing, this less than thing. And I could see in every direction at once in this darkness, and I was content. I had no fear. I was freed of all pain. And way far in the distance, in this, like a big, huge womb, uh, there was this deeper darkness that I couldn't see through into. And then this light appeared. It was gigantic compared to me, and I was gigantic compared to my human self. And this light was like it came out of the deeper darkness, and it was an opening, and it was a pouring like a waterfall, and it was made of all of the colors of all of the stars in the sky that night, just a day's drive from the Arctic Circle with no light pollution. A billion stars in the sky of all different sizes and shapes and colors. And it was all of these colors and shapes and more. It was all of the electromagnetic spectrum. It was infrared and ultraviolet and microwave and radio wave. And it was all of these many different colored lights. And simultaneously, not flipping A to B, but superpositioned. It was pure white light. It was both at the same time. It was one thing and many. And it was the most beautiful I'd ever seen. And it wasn't just beauty that I saw with my eyes, it's beauty that I felt with my being. And I wanted it. I wanted. And as soon as I wanted, I moved toward it, and it came toward me. And I came up to it, and it was this flow like a waterfall, shimmering like fish scales in the sunshine. And I touched it with my being. And as I touched it with my being, it opened me and flowed inside of me, and I was enveloped inside of it, and I expanded, and all these things happened at the same time. There was no, I tell it in a sequence because I don't know how else to do that, but this was timelessness. There's no forward or backward. There's all time, and not just forward and backward, inside out and upside down and inverted. It's time, the existence of all things all at once, block time, like block time, but in a single point. And I expanded, and I understood my created self. not self-created, but created self. And I don't mean my human being. I mean my essence of my energy self being called into being in the now, and have been called into being in the now for eons, always current, always lasting. And as I expanded, there was a time where I saw was my human self again. Part of me came with me, and it was the part of me that was all of my actions, nothing physical, but all that I was as a human. And this light saw into me and all of my dark shadow places that I'd hidden my entire life. And it loved me as I was, no matter what I did, no matter who I was. I'd been loved since the moment of my creation. And it was as if I could hear my soul name being called into being chanted all the time. And I went through judgment, but I wasn't judged. I saw myself, I felt myself give pain to others from their point of view. I was inside of all of the people I hurt in my life, and I experienced all of the suffering that I gave to them with intention, the things that I meant to hurt them with, out of my jealousy or anger or rage or immaturity. Simultaneously, I experienced all of those things, my point of view and their point of view. And it turned out that all of the pain that I gave to them, I gave to myself. And it was like a barrier to me, a barrier of shame, not because I had done wrong, but because this light that was looking at me could see all of me was so beautiful, so pure, so unlimited, so unaffected by my actions, loved me with a tidal wave as I was. Mercy doesn't begin to explain. And I saw that I caused all those things, but I also saw that I wasn't the prime mover that made me what I was. I was made of molecules in a universe that was far bigger than me. I was just a thing inside it, following the code that created my species, my DNA, my interactions with my society. And I could see that I was no better and no worse than anybody, any human. I was the same as, which is less than, this unlimited and beloved, always beloved. And when the love that I carried with me from my life, which was the love I gave away and the love that was given to me, when it was through that ear that I could hear this love being poured out to me. And as it poured out to me, I accepted it. It was like a tidal wave, like this huge, overwhelming, overpowering love that I couldn't resist. I was swept away by. And when I was swept away by it, it became me. It filled me like a balloon inflating with all these different things that we separate here: truth, love, hope, beauty, joy, bliss, paradise, understanding, awe, gratitude, adoration, knowledge. And I was the thing itself. And I expanded to this place where I felt like any more expansion, I would obliterate and re-enfold into this oneness of being. And when I was in this state, I felt, I experienced myself like a singular photon. And I was this singular photon in this darkness, but I was optically cabled, superpositioned with the field of photons. This field of photons was infinitely deep and infinitely tall and wide and broad, and it was living, and I was it, and somehow a limited part of it. I was the same as it, a portion of it, a particle of it. And I then could see this lower part of myself. And this lower part of myself was living all these lives simultaneously. It was like this huge, long, everlasting aspect of myself being seen from this infinite immortal aspect of myself. And this living soul part of me was incorporated into all of these lives, or all of these lives were incorporated into it. And I could see that I had all these lives. And I need to say that I was raised Roman Catholic and Greek Orthodox, and reincarnation not on the table, but I saw them all. And I knew that I was none of them. I knew I was this oversoul. I knew I was this infinite photon, and that these lives, they were interesting. And so I asked, could I see? And I was brought into two. One was human, one was not. I don't know what. And then with this bliss, I was somehow reduced again. And I had this conscious memory of my mom and my dad and my sister who had vanished, run away when I was a kid. 14 I was. And I said, what about them? If I stay here, aren't they going to suffer? Second child lost. All the while I was whole and healed and welcomed and perfect in my being. And as I asked, what about my folks? I was swept across this infinite space to like an edge. And this edge was energy. And part of me poked out into this universe, and this universe was our universe, and most of me, all of me, except for this tiny percentage of me, was back inside the belly of the divine. But this part of me could see our entire universe, and it looks like, if you've seen the latest James Webb Telescope photograph of the galaxies, like weavings of stars and light in these vast dark spaces. I was in a vast dark space surrounded by all of these galaxies, all connected, all wide. And my vision was turned back toward the origin of it. And it wasn't like the Big Bang, or maybe it was, but it was live. It was happening as I watched it. The darkness that my mind couldn't see inside of, the infinite darkness, outpoured this uncreated light, and this light wove itself into our universe. Like it went from darkness into light into matter, and this matter was all things in our universe, all of the galaxies, all of the space between them. Nothing was except that light was in it, invisible but present. And the voice who was speaking to me said to me, in the way that I love you now. And the love was the size of our universe. And it wasn't just ours, it was multiverse. There was universes after universes after universes popping out of the deep darkness in rapid sequence. And all of this love was mine, for me. And my wellness, I knew the wellness of my being was eternally beloved, unconditionally, in a way that I can't say and carry with me today. And then my vision was shifted to the earth, and I saw our planet in live time, night on one side, day on the other, the sun in the distance. But our planet was like this hologram that I could see through and see at the time, 7 billion people on the planet. I could see them all at once, not like from A to B, but all of them at once. And inside of every single human being, sleeping and waking, at war or murderous, peacefully loving, inside of every single one was this golden light, like a fleck of gold. And it was brilliant in everyone, but the whole planet was covered with this fog. And I could see all the light through the fog, but nobody could see the light inside themselves or others through the fog. And the voice said to me, in the way that I love you, with this broad, particular, unique, most special person in all the universe love, I love every single person in the same way. And that because I am all in all and love beyond imagination, nothing is lost to me. Everything is made of me. Everything unfolds back into me. And all is well because of me, because I am love, and has been and will be well. And then I saw my parents' faces, A and B. And A, I see their lives without me. and I see the intensity of their suffering. And in B, I see their lives with me. I see suffering, but less so. And I see their deaths. And in their deaths, they're the same as me, fully beloved, whole and healed. And the voice said, choose, stay or go. If you stay, they'll be here in a timeless moment, in the wink of an eye. And I understood that my human life was the snap of a finger in terms of time. And I thought, well, I could wait for them and they'll be here in a moment's time, but they will have suffered all this pain that I could alleviate just by going back, not by doing anything, just not dying. And so I said, if I go back, can I come back here to this bliss and heaven? And the voice said, yes, it's time for you to stay, but yes, you can come back. I said, well, then I choose to live my life. And it said, you won't live your life. And it sent me out. And as I went, I was made more dense. I was inside of this angelic orb of consciousness that had carried me out, this portion of the divine, and I was being compressed. And as I flew, I looked back to heaven and could see only the darkness now. But out of it came this beam of white light. And it was like a huge laser, the size of a city block. And I followed it, looking at it, and then around this light were all of these doors, a million doorways, out like petals of flower, all these doorways. And from the center, the light radiated out and then weakened toward the edges. And the voice said inside me, commanded me, choose. And it told me that I had a job, and the job was to bring back love and light. And I got to choose the life I would live. And I thought to myself, I can't be some saintly person. I need to be a fully flawed human being. And I chose creativity and I chose a few ideas, but I also chose the light. It said, choose light. I chose the light, not the full beam, but off to the side. And this door opened and I went down this tunnel. And in this tunnel were more doors. And these doors led to all these other lives I could live. And down this tunnel I went. And at the end of it, we emerged and there was a body hanging on a cliff, strapped in with a harness, and this other body shaken and shaken and shaken. I didn't know what was going on. And this being pierced the chest of the one who was being shaken and opened it and stuffed me inside. And now I was confined and in this much reduced place of pain. And I looked through this opening and I saw the being, and I watched this opening close. And as it closed, I felt my brain were on like in the 1930s and 20s, there were these radios with vacuum tubes that you'd have to turn the switch and the electricity would have to slowly warm up the radio. I felt like my brain was coming back to life like that. It was a slow process. I was observing. And as it came back online, I was thrust into pain. And I felt like I was stuck inside a spiked sarcophagus with the racking pain that I suddenly had that I didn't remember existed. And as my brain came back online, my ears opened. And as I began to hear, I heard noises, and that resolved into language. And the language was, don't die, don't die, don't die. And this thing that I was inside of was being shaken. And I opened my eyes, and there was Tim looking down at me. I didn't know who he was. And he's screaming and yelling, don't die, don't die, don't die. And he saw my eyes open and he said, you were dead. You were dead. I thought you were dead. You are going to die. I'm going to die. And he pulled me up and he's all excited. And I didn't know who he was or where I was or what I was. And slowly over a few minutes, I came back to myself, but I didn't fully come back. From that moment on, being inside of this thing was like being software, an app inside of a biological robot where most of my data, most of my self was above me looking through this thing. So I was alien instantaneously. And eventually Tim got me to pull the rope and the rope came free. We descended and we self-treated for hypothermia. I should say I was on the National Ski Patrol and well-trained in winter rescue. So I was the first aid person on this 10-day snow caving backcountry ice climbing expedition. The two of us, Tim and I, had complementary skills. So we self-treated for hypothermia as the sun came up, and then a whole bunch of things happened on the way home, including we got time in jail and totaled the car, and I came back an entirely different person. And I've been living that way since.
I mean, it's such a beautiful story, and I have to say, you're such a wonderful storyteller. It should go as no surprise because you've written two beautiful books. But it's amazing. Your story is amazing, and it's also amazing the way you tell the story. I also briefly want to ask why you ended up in jail.
Well, I was asleep in the passenger seat as Tim was driving rapidly through a town. He sped through, and when the Mountie pulled us over and wanted to give us a ticket, Tim said he'll pay it when he gets back to the States. And the Mountie said, "You Americans, you never do. I'm not going to let you go until you pay it." And we said we were not going to pay it. And so he arrested us. And he took us in his car and locked us in the jail. And we were pretending to be broke, but we weren't. We had some money in our boots. This is backpackers often carry their money in their boots, at least in those days. I did.
Yeah.
And so I had my money in my boots, and we pooled our funds and paid through the bars, and they let us go. And then I caused us to have a terrible accident and hit a semi and destroyed the car. Neither of us got badly hurt, and but I broke my relationship with Tim when I totaled this car. And with the remaining money, Tim took a bus because we had all these cross-country skis and poles because we were snow caving in the backcountry. And Tim took a bus back to Bozeman, Montana, which is where we were living. And I hitchhiked back, and with my new stutter and my totally crashed emotional state, I was a wreck. I was a wreck. I didn't know who I was or where I was or what was going on. And I totaled my friend's car, and I was in a foreign country, and then I was in a theater troupe at this university, and we left within a couple of weeks, we left on this 24,000 miles. Sorry about that. Kilometers. I don't know how many Ks it is. A long distance, 3-month tour. And I separated myself from the other people, and I meditated in the back of the pickup truck. I'd learned meditation in high school, went to a Catholic high school, and I went to hunt for myself. And I kind of been on that journey ever since.
And you mentioned this experience that you've been through changed everything for you and changed the path that your life was on. And you're also very young at that age, 20, so you almost had your whole life ahead of you, and it was pretty open-ended, I would imagine. So did you understand at that time that it was a near-death experience, or what did you think had happened? And how did you come to terms with your choice of coming back? And how did you change your life based on it?
I didn't know what it was. I didn't actually find out a name for it till 1986 when my then wife handed me a book by Raymond Moody called Life After Life. So for 6 years, I had no name for it, but I had been reading. I was an English major, and I was reading the Transcendentalists and the Romantics, and realized through those readings that the Upanishads and the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita existed, and the Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching and a whole bunch of other books. And so I began an exploration to see if there was anyone else in the world like me, because I didn't know anybody like me. And I kept my mouth shut because I knew how insane it sounded to even me. But I was an entirely different person. This whole place looked fragile to me, thin like celluloid film, black and white and flickering and broken, easily broken. But underneath it, this light was pouring through. Light in everything and everyone, and there was radiance it wasn't just that I could see it, I could feel it from trees and flowers and birds and butterflies, and animals treated me differently. And I loved everything indiscriminately. And that caused me tons of trouble. I went to divinity school, eventually. I was going to be an architect. I was join the family firm, go to graduate school, get my graduate degree like my sister, join the family firm, and I just couldn't do that. I was shattered and angry. I was angry that I chose to come back. I didn't realize what a loss I would have. I can't, the comparison I make is this. Googleplex is 10 to the 100th power. That's how much light there was. And here, it's the number one. This radical difference between this fullness and this broken emptiness nearly broke me. And I was so angry that I was allowed to come back. And so I lived this dual interior life. I was in deep depression because I lost bliss and wholeness and wellness. And I was stuck in this crude thing where I had to feed it and bathe it and move with effort. And I was sad. And those things, the anger and the sadness, they made me both resist what happened to me and propel me toward it. So I lived these two things simultaneously. I found that meditation, and I found Kriya yoga. I read the Yoga Sutras and the autobiography of a yogi. And I found that there had been techniques used for thousands of years to carve your way back to the divine without language, without concept, without religion. When I was dead, there was no religion there. There was no gender. There were no concepts. Nothing human beings have thought of existed there. Everything that they thought of, everything we've thought of, are a portion of a much larger, universal, greater than universal system that is, our concepts are puny. They're nothing. They don't exist in the presence of unlimited, ultimate, prime love. And so my loss of that, my despair and my darkness, I realized that nothing here satisfied me. The only thing that did was this reality with this capital R. And so I discovered when I was young that I would follow that path, even though I was angry that I was on it. It takes me 40 years now to integrate. I finally pretty much integrated after 20 years. And then it's been a journey. How do I live with what I am? I aim myself toward this light and integrate myself in the world through it. I found that I couldn't come back the way I was. My life was completely over. I was not the same person. I looked like the same person, but all of my choices were different than my family expectations, my friends' expectations, my girlfriends. To say I was eccentric understates the alien loneliness that I was experiencing. All I had was this interior light that I had left. And so I went in pursuit of it, even though I was rebellious against what I felt like was unjustly sending me back, even though it was my choice. I've come to terms with that. I've understood now, many decades later. I'm not in the place I was then, but my behaviors changed. And I couldn't help myself. My family noticed. I kept it from them for 20 years. I kept it from everyone for 20 years. One or two people I told my wife on the day after we got married, which was unfair to her. But I can't now help who I am and what I am. My adjustment is ongoing.
You mentioned looking for bliss after leaving that place, looking for the light, looking for, I'd say, maybe remnants of that light, because it's difficult to find the feeling that you described on Earth. Were there experiences or places where you were able to find bliss and try to get actually towards religion because you chose to be a pastor? Was that where you found happiness and bliss?
Oh no, far, far from it. Anywhere in nature, any single plant, even a mosquito that I would slap and send it to its next incarnation. Nature spoke like trumpets, like a big band, like speakers turned up to loud. There was, and there still is, there's just this radiant energy of light that is in all things living. That's why I got plants, because I feel them. So nature became my religion. And religion, I lost all my religion. I still am not a believer. I worked in the church, but I'm not a believer. I know that the divine is unspeakable, uncontainable, unlimited. I found a way to make a living and to express this inner light that lived inside of me, to help people, to be a servant of people, to help them in their pain. But also working in the church provided me an opportunity to continue, backpedal a second. I went to Yale Divinity School to study mysticism, which they don't really teach, but the dean of students allowed me to study there across the university, and allowed me in 3 years of independent study. I never told her why I was doing this. And during that time, she talked me into becoming a pastor. I was finally decided I'd get my doctoral degree and study the comparative Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity, mystical. That's what was my interest. She talked me into becoming a minister because I was expressing compassion a lot, not like I was trying to. It just kind of came back with the package. And so the church provided me an opportunity to work in society undercover. Oh, nobody knew. But it also let me practice my Kriya yoga, my asanas, and my meditation, and my studies. I could continue my scholarship and mysticism under the guise of education. Pastors, we continue our education. So I chose what to read and what to study, and worked in a bunch of churches, did a lot of good work, was a troublemaker, because that comes with the package too. But it's a troublemaker through love. It's not one by trying to hurt people. It's one trying to help people against the powerful, and that causes trouble. And it was the best part of being a pastor was leaving the church for good. When I finally stepped outside of it, I had freedom again. I loved working with the people, the elderly, the homeless, the people who were struggling, those who were grieving. And that's where I found my fulfillment in my job. But it was always about this interior space. It was never about religion. I became quite educated in religion. I used that as a tool. I used those ideas as tools to explain the unexplainable. But all of the doctrine and dogma, I have no time for that. It means nothing to me. What really matters to me is humanity and our well-being, people I love, and my interior journey, this carving out a space inside myself so I can live in this fragility, making a bigger cistern of myself so I can survive here with fun. I sound like I'm so serious. I'm not. I actually love having fun. And that's one of the things I decided to do when I came back, is if I'm going to be stuck inside this body, I'm going to have as much fun as I possibly can. And so I do. And I try to have fun with friends and family too.
And I have to say, it's quite a unique perspective that you shared on religion, especially after having studied Christianity, mysticism, different religions. I heard Shads as well. So you have studied different religions extensively, and you have a very unique perspective on faith, on what religion should be to us. So, what I want to do is I want to give the audience a definition of what is faith, because I think faith is something that's sometimes very different than religion, and I don't think the two are synonymous. So, what is faith to you?
I don't have any faith. I don't have any faith because I don't have any belief. I have only experience and knowledge, but I've been witness to faith. And faith is belief with experience. I have an idea of what religion is or what God is, and then you have an experience. And what I mean is, and this is more common than people talk about, and people don't talk about it because they're afraid to. But frequently, some high percentage of people who are grieving, somewhere around 60%, have some kind of visitation after death. Someone they love dies, and that someone comes back to them in some form, a dream or a presence, and communicates their presence or love or forgiveness in a way that's beyond the rational mind. And that's why people don't talk about it, because it's not rational. A huge percent of the population, if you ask your friends, you'll find out for yourself that there are those among your friends who don't talk about it, who've experienced it. And the person who experiences a drop of the divine, that's what comes back in these experiences of the deceased coming to visit. They bring the light with them. And when that light appears, and it can be that kind of experience or some other kind, then faith comes. Because now you know that you don't die. Now you know your friend's not really dead. And that reorients an entire life. Faith is this thing that grows out of belief combined with experience that shows you that this transcendent is real in some form that you can't comprehend, but you did experience, even if you can't make meaning of it. And that faith has nothing to do with religion. It has only to do with experience. And some people don't have those experiences. Some people have this intuition that what they're hearing in church is not quite right, because they have this noise of love inside themselves, this noise of peace, or this noise of there's more to this than they're telling me. That is part of faith as well. It's been a way I've had to learn that. I have blind spots because of my near-death experience. I don't understand belief. I don't really understand it at all, because how can one acquiesce to an idea for which there is no proof? When belief becomes faith, it's because there's suddenly proof. And the proof is your experience of an angelic form, or Buddha comes to you, or Jesus appears in a dream, or you have this experience where the beauty of the sunset is so powerful that it brings you to tears in a transcendent moment. Not rational, not belief, but experience. And from there, faith can guide life. I once had this man in my church. He was wealthy, done well, good-hearted, one of the few really, truly good-hearted people that I met in my years of ministry. And as he was dying in his hospital bed, he had cancer. He was like 80 or 82. And the piercing, beautiful blue eyes. And his kids, who I knew, it's a small town, a resort. I live in this resort small town, sailing and summer people and that sort of thing. And his kids, all well-to-do, tried to get me to talk to Dad about cancer treatments that would buy him a year or two. And I went in to talk to him and I said, Bill, your kids have put me up to this, but I'm going to do my job by them and try to convince you that you should get your treatments, even though I know the year or two that you're going to buy are going to cause you suffering. And he listened to me, and he said to me with a smile on his face and the sparkle in his blue eyes, he said, I've spent my entire life preparing for this moment in my faith. I'm ready to die. And he did. And literally with a smile on his face, because I was there with his family as he went. And the power of this allowed him to die with beauty. It was one of the most beautiful deaths I've ever seen, because he knew, because he had this faith and hope. And from his faith, from this experience, these experiences, which he never told me, because I didn't come out to him. He didn't know I was a near-death experiencer. This was part of my secret life at the time. I wasn't talking about all the visitations, but he had some kind of experience in his life that gave him this deeper aspect, which made him the person that he was, which gave him hope that when he died, he would not end. Because somehow he had seen a glimpse himself, whatever that was. And how do I know that? I could see it in his eyes. I could see one of the after effects, after gifts of this near-death experience for me is I see light inside of people, and it has different intensities. Sometimes it's so brilliant, it blinds me with the radiance of it. And Bill was one of those guys. I never told him about me. He didn't need to know, because he could see it too.
I have to say I've known very few people who have passed away, but what I see as a recurrence is that they know when it will happen and they want it to happen. I've seen it with my grandmother as well. She wanted it to happen. She knew it was time, And it's just, for me at the time, I was much younger, very difficult to piece together what do you say at a time, what does support look like at the time. I think that's the question that I was struggling with. How can you be supportive, and what's the best thing that that person needs?
For you to be there, hold their hand, listen to their stories, accept whatever they have to offer, talk about death, because that's what they're thinking about, and forgive them if you can, whatever it was, needs forgiving, but mostly just to love them. And if they need you to leave the room for them to go, leave the room. And if they're clinging, some people tell them it's okay. And the reason they cling isn't necessarily because they're afraid to go, but they're afraid that you won't be well without them.
That's, I think, exactly what I would have wanted to know 10 years ago, was it? I think, but at least I think it can help people that are in the process of losing somebody. Or do you have any advice for people that are grieving somebody that has passed away?
Oh yeah. Don't let anybody tell you how to grieve. You grieve the way that you grieve. If you want to cry in the grocery line, let your tears flow. If you want to grieve by throwing yourself into work, throw yourself into work, because the grief won't ever go away. You're just managing the amounts that you can bear. Everybody grieves in their own way. And make sure that nobody stops you from grieving, because it won't, the wound will heal, but always leave a scar. And if you don't grieve, if you don't let the tears flow, they're like this release valve for the pressure of grief, for however long it takes. If you repress it, the wound will stay gaping and open, become infected. And if it heals, well, it leaves a scar and it never goes away. But you learn to live with it. No one escapes that in life, except for those who die very young. All the rest of us, we all carry the scars of it. And when you grieve in groups, like at a memorial service or a funeral, that's hopeful for everybody, because everybody grieves everybody that they lost at those things. So allow yourself to cry then too. It'll take about a year before it begins to heal. Sometimes longer, sometimes years longer. But after a year, you've gone through all the holidays and the birthdays, and now you know what to face, and it will get easier.
I'm getting a bit emotional, but I think that's just wonderful advice. Because we're on the topic of grieving and difficult experiences that we do have to go through, how can we make sense or find meaning when we're going through challenges, through difficult circumstances?
Funny you should bring that up. I had that conversation about an hour ago with somebody. I'm in this odd position. Instead of trying to make meaning out of circumstances, I lean more deeply into the light inside of me and accept the circumstances in which I find myself to the best of my ability, whether it's a broken leg or an ailment or the loss of a friend. I should add that this doesn't make me immune to grief or to pain or to suffering of any kind. I still grieve and I still suffer, but the only meaning there is for me is the reality that is beyond here. It is the trouble of my life and the force that drives me toward it. I find that in hindsight is where meaning can be made from circumstances beyond our control. Looking back at them. Why did I lose my job? Well, look at my life now. Now I can look back and understand why it happened and what the meaning is for today. When we're in the midst of that kind of thing, it's very difficult to make a meaning out of it, because there's not all the parts of the puzzle. They're not there. The story hasn't been written. How do you know the meaning of the story if it's still being told? You can't. And so in the middle of it all, I keep going back into this space inside myself to my original self. And I find my solace there, my quietude there, that allows me to move forward with whatever circumstances I find myself in. And I want to say this because least people think that I haven't had major trials in my life. I've had major trials in my life. This isn't theoretical for me. This is how I've gotten through them. I dive deeper into myself to this place where my mind stops working and I can just be with the energy, with the light, with the quietude, with the whatever you want to call it. And then when I come from that space back into my world daily, I have perspective on myself. I have worries about, finances and the world and my children and grandkids, and I have all that stuff. I can't control any of it. I control what I can. When my mind runs off in fear or rumination, I stop it with meditation. I train my mind to be in my control rather than allowing it to be in control. I like to let my mind wander too, but not when it's cursing me or telling me that I'm bad or I'll never get out of this circumstance. Then I shut it up because it does no good to me. But I let the story tell itself and find the meaning at the end of the chapter or the end of the book when I look back and understand all the parts of it. Otherwise, I just try to keep my eye on this light inside myself and move forward. I keep moving forward, whatever that means in the circumstance.
You brought up meditation, which I think is very important for us to be able to deal with ourselves, with our feelings, with our emotions, no matter what feelings and emotions we're going through. For somebody that has never done it before, what's the easiest way to start? What's the first step to start meditating?
There are lots of different ways to meditate. I bet people meditate all the time and don't even know it. There's formal meditation, which is what I'm going to talk about that in a second. But I bet people already have a practice of meditation of some kind. And maybe it's while they're skiing and they stop thinking because if they think they fall. Or maybe it's while they're painting and they're absorbed in the photograph that they're transferring onto the page with watercolors. Or maybe it's while they're walking and they're listening to the birds around them and not to themselves. Meditation is when we don't listen to the story inside our heads, forward or backwards, what happened, what will happen, or whatever's running through our mind. When we get into the flow of not thinking, of just feeling or moving or paying attention, music, playing the piano. Piano players say to me, because I don't play the piano, that when they play the piano, they're not thinking in language, they're thinking in music. And it stops the story that they tell themselves. In a formal setting, meditation is like that, in that it's breath and mind and body together. So a super simple practice, which I still practice all the time. It's like a Zazen practice and meditation, or Theravada Buddhism has some of that in it, and it has Christian mysticism in it, and it's super simple. There's no theology to it. Relaxation response is very similar. Feet flat on the floor, straight back chair, hands on your lap, straight spine, with breath in the nose, inflating the belly like a bellows, releasing. That's the basic physical part of it. Let the lungs fill naturally, not with force. Just use your belly to expand. So it's better not to eat before, and expand your belly big enough so that the lungs fill, and then just release them and follow your breath. As you breathe in, occupy your mind with a word or a series of words, the same word or the same series again and again and again and again. I have a prayer chant. You could use a number or a color or something that doesn't have some idea attached to it necessarily. And lock that word to your breath. And as you breathe in, say that word inside your head in language. And then on the exhale, say that word again, over and over and over. And if it sounds boring, it's only because you're actually not doing it. When that state is achieved through practice, and it's not that hard to figure it out, when your breath and your word or chant are together, the mind is occupied so it can't be bored. So it's sort of like using the energy against itself. The mind wants to run, take control of the mind with a single thought, lock it to something physical like the breath, and then use the body as another part of the tool. So it's basically three-legged stool. And when the mind wanders, which it will, going back in time, yesterday I did this, or tomorrow I got to do that thing, or I got so much work to do, I should be meditating. When that happens, don't try to stop it. The mind won't stop when you try to stop it. It'll just gain energy. Go back to your breath, go back to your chant, and practice 20 minutes for 7 days. and see how it works. And if you practice in the same chair at the same time, your body gets used to it. Set your, timer on your phone and reduce shut off the lights, be in a quiet space, and practice makes progress. It can be a tool that will surprise you how useful it is in every aspect of your life. It helps overcome anger and jealousy, fear, hatred, all of the negative emotions. It creates a sharpness of mind that can be applied in business and in your personal life. It reduces stress, brings down blood pressure, it quiets anxiety. The neuroplasticity of the mind, of the brain, actually, meditation can increase the size of your brain. It can train the prefrontal cortex. It can make you a better person. And to treat people without reaction, to bring calmness to your daily life, so that instead of panicking or being offended, you can drop back into this peaceful place. And instead of being offended back at the giving offense in return, you can remember who you are and be calm and rational in your response, because it quiets those radical emotions that want to lash out. So it can change relationships. It does change relationships. It's difficult. It's difficult because it takes discipline. The practice itself is simple. The discipline of the application of it, that's the hard part. And that's why ritualizing it helps. Same chair, same space, same time. And eventually, if you practice for 20 minutes for a long enough time, you'll know when 20 minutes are up and you won't even think about it. You'll just be like, oh, I'm done. And it's over. And my day goes on. And it creates this residual too. It leaves this peace inside of us that then gets refilled every day. And then the whole day is peaceful, meaning the whole life becomes peaceful. And I don't mean like non-action peace. I mean like non-agitated peace, like non-jealous peace, quieting anxiety peace. It's a powerful tool that's in every religion around the world in different forms and has been passed down in generation after generation because it works. That's why it keeps getting passed down. If it didn't work, it would disappear.
I couldn't agree with you more. I started meditating. I have to share this. When I was a student, when I was doing my master's, and I've always been quite an anxious person. Like anxiety is also one of the things that tend to not go well when I'm overwhelmed. So when I would have exams, I would prepare, but I would be the person, walking in with her notes into the exam room, like reading on the street those last few things. Everybody was making fun of my color coordinated notes. I used so many highlights. It was insane. But so when I could see the clock being almost exam time, I would start freaking out. What if it's not enough? What if I don't know it? There's this one lesson I didn't study so well. I bet I should have studied that more. So what I started doing is, and especially I think with colleagues at school, like they will feed off of your anxiety, and they will also, some of them will also increase it, because they'll also say, oh, but did you read that article? Oh, you didn't? Difficult. Like, do you know that? And do you know? So what I would do is I would just like step outside a few minutes prior to the exam. And I was saying that earlier, I've always had this reflex of whenever I'm feeling stressed, I would just put my hand on my chest. And I realized like the heart is a bit lower, but I would always tend to do that when I'm stressed. And I would just take deep breaths in and exhale. And I would do that a few times. I would do that when walking. And just that, like, it would help me not be in my thoughts anymore and not worry and say, you know what, it's an exam. If I fail it, if my grade isn't good, well, there's life after this. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be okay. I've done my best. I'm not going to improve in 2 minutes what I haven't done in the past months.
That is a very useful practice of meditation. The thing about not having incense or music or any tool outside of yourself other than your mind and your breath is that you can bring those everywhere you go. And in every circumstance like yours, take a few breaths and calm yourself down. You're in charge of your mind. Your mind's not in charge of you. It says it is, but no.
Exactly. And this actually brings me to a live stream that you're hosting every week called Not Church. Tell me a bit about what it is and what can people expect from it.
Because I have this background in religion, when I went to Catholic school, I read a gospel a year. And so I kind of knew Jesus. And when I went to divinity school, after I died, he wasn't the same guy anymore. After I died, Jesus sounded to me like Lao Tzu. He sounded to me like Meister Eckhart. He sounded to me like the Upanishads, that he was a singleness teacher of one light and that he was completely misunderstood. And so not church is no doctrine, no dogma, no, in the United States, we say no bravo Sierra. That means no BS. What I'm trying to do is reveal the light that's already there. I bring in Buddhism and I bring in the Upanishads all the time. So I'm looking at the ancient literature and showing that the idea that the church teaches is incorrect, that you don't need Jesus, you already have it inside you, and that's exactly what he was teaching all the way along. And everything that he was teaching has nothing to do with religion. It has everything to do with awakening and enlightenment and realization, liberation, satori, samadhi, whatever you want to call it, freedom from self, recognition of understanding your original self. And it's the intellectual end of things. It's the storytelling end of things. It's not the practice end. Practice is more important from my point of view. Meditation matters more. But Sunday mornings, we formed a community of mystics from all over the world who come, and we use what I'm talking about on Sunday morning for a live Zoom meeting after. People have had mystical experiences of all different kinds, psychedelics and shamanistic and Catholic and Buddhist, but they've had these experiences that they can't speak about anywhere else, and we have a conversation. So this week I've been comparing the four major branches of yoga to different aspects of Christian mystical practice. This week we talked about jnana yoga, which is the yoga of the acquisition of knowledge, the study of the scriptural texts, the feeding of your mind with Rumi or Hafez or the sayings of Jesus in a contemplative way, in order to open one's heart and pierce into the language. So that's what we talked about this week. Sometimes we talk about, I've been going through the Gospel of Thomas, dug up in 1945. It's a collection of the sayings of Jesus. I'm trying to help people escape Christianity, the confines of their evangelical or Catholic mindsets, and show that they have inside them the light that they already need is already there, but they don't have to abandon the stories of their faith because those stories actually contain the same thing that I'm trying to talk about, because Jesus was just like them, a mystic. So Not Church is a 20-minute talk followed by an hour or 2-hour conversation with anywhere from 25 to 50 people from all over the world. I teach Kriya yoga on Tuesdays, a live class, and meditation on Mondays and Wednesdays to help people practice. And I counsel people who've had these strange mystical experiences that they keep to themselves because society or their family or friends either don't understand them or don't care to understand them and don't want to understand them. And so I help people integrate back into this world and understand what happened to them. And my book is that book. No, where is it? There, it's an international bestseller. It's being made into a movie, so I'm working on that too. And you can find all this stuff at peterpanagore.love. That's my URL. You can find all the links there to my YouTube channel and Instagram and all TikTok and all that stuff. peterpanagore.love.
We'll add all the links down below so people will be able to find them. And tell me more about the movie. So the book is being turned into a movie. That's exciting.
Oh, super wicked unexpected. Like, oh my God. So I was in an interview, this thing called Buddha at the Gas Pump. And the next day, this woman called me on the phone. I don't know who she is. And so she starts telling me who she is, where she lives, and what she does. And so I Googled her, IMDb, International Movie Database. I'm like, oh my God, she's a serious producer. Look at her credits. And so, but she had an experience like mine, very similar. And so we ended up talking for about a year and became friends. I talked to her almost every week as we were helping her integrate, and she was helping me. And then one day she said to me, "Who's making your movie?" I said, "I don't know. You?" She said, "Yes, me and my ex-husband." And so we sent him the book. And over the weekend, he read it and he said, "I love this. Let's make a movie." He's a pretty big producer. Said, "But there's a problem. It's only act 2 of a 3-act screenplay. I need act 1 and act 3." So I've spent the last 3 years writing my next book, which they also optioned for a film, so for Act 1 and Act 2 and a potential sequel. And right now, I have finished my work for them. They have my last chapter, Act 3, in their hands. The crazy thing is that I had to learn a new writing style. I was very much an imagistic, intellectual storyteller, but I had to learn to understand, to drive the plot, even though it's a memoir, drive the plot emotionally. And so they hammered me with critique. It was both painful and perfection. And so finally I was able to construct a story style that met their needs, and they have the last chapter. And so within a month now, I'll know whether they accept that chapter. They'll probably give me some notes, and then it's movie making time. They'll attach a director. They've been working on money. He's making a movie right now. They've been working on money. They'll attach a director and an actor and a screenplay writer, and they'll move ahead with it. And so that's where we're at. And what I'm going to do next is approach publisher through my new literary agent. I was without an agent, and my publisher introduced me to a very, very different kind of agent from a major literary agency in the United States with a long history of publishing some of my favorite people from previous life. Zora Neale Hurston and Langston Hughes, the poet, and people I admired as writers. And so I'm going to be approaching my new agent with this book, and hopefully spend portion of this year writing that book so it can come out before the movie. And my goal in all of this, I was in television. After church life, I got recruited into TV and radio, and I had this TV show for a spot for 2 minutes every day in my statewide market, and on a couple of different TV stations. And I learned the power of the mass market. I learned a lot working there about corporations and nonprofits and marketing. And I realized that my goal in all of this is to allow people who've had near-death experiences, or people who've had other kinds of mystical experiences, which is a lot of people, half the population, find a voice. I'm trying to normalize the conversation around this. And I'm trying to show that you can be an analytical, rational, capable, professional person and also have these experiences that inform your life and change your direction. And so that if I can come out of the closet, maybe others can come out of the closet, and we can begin to have these conversations in boardrooms or in subways or at bars or in our living rooms, so that we can normalize these things, because it's a major factor in human life, these experiences. It doesn't matter if you're Muslim or Jewish or Sikh or Christian or atheist. These experiences happen to people. They change their lives, and we need to talk about them, because humanity, we don't have a great track record for our tribalism. And if we have any hope in the world, and I have lots of hope in the world, I have lots of hope in the goodness of humanity, despite our track record of being violent people, tribally. I have a lot of hope in the world that if this can be brought forth, if we can have a conversation, we can recognize this understanding that consciousness doesn't go from the bottom up. It doesn't originate in the brain. It comes from top down. And when this single understanding of our human nature can be enter into the zeitgeist of our public conversation, then we can begin to understand that we actually are the same. We don't just share 99% of our DNA, or it's like 99.9% of our DNA with each other, some crazy number like that. We are also greater than humanity. And in this greaterness of our humanity, maybe we can have an opportunity as these major social and cultural changes are coming, climate change and AI and biology, DNA synthesis and synthetic life and the combination quantum computing and all these things that are coming at us very rapidly now. If we're going to have a chance to survive as a species, all these things are going to change our society. But nothing we've ever done has been able to maintain the peace. And I want to have an opportunity. I want to see if there's an opportunity for humanity to maybe see there's more to us than meets the eye, and that we're all the same inside. And I know that sounds utopian and innocent and naive, but there are 10 to 20 million near-death experiencers in the United States alone alive today, not to mention the 10 to 20 million in Europe and around the world. We all come back with this thing that we experience that we can't express. I want to free those voices, and freeing those voices, maybe through or help free those voices. I don't have any sort of misunderstanding that I have some sort of power or I'm some sort of great, lever pusher in the world. I just want to be part of the party that helps bring forth the idea that there's more to humanity than meets the eye, and the mass market's the way to go. And so that's why I'm super psyched about this, if we can make it all work. And so far, so good.
The message that we all get through near-death experiences and through the people that have lived through that is so positive, and it gives us hope. It gives us a reason for our challenges. It gives us a way forward, regardless of the situations that we find ourselves in. I couldn't be anything other than happy that it's going to indeed get to the mass market now, and it's going to be a movie, and hopefully more people will hear about it.
We hope so. There's a lot on YouTube. There's a lot of near-death experience channels. Your Tales of Resistance podcast is featuring a near-death experiencer. It's already coming into the public square. And the more that it's in the public square, the more opportunity people who've had other experiences can talk about them too. And there is a problem with it. And the problem is there's all sorts of speculation. It's better for near-death experiences to tell their story exactly as it happened than to speculate on what didn't happen to them. Because religion grows out of the theologians who follow the mystics. Every religion starts with a mystic. Look all of Zoroastrianism for, Sikhism, Christianity. It's the theologians who come after who make up the rules and project out from what the story wasn't to what they think it should be. That's where the problem comes. My advice to near-death experiences is stick with what you know, stay with the love, tell the story as you know it. Don't say just because you had this experience that you know that ghosts exist if you've never seen one. Now, maybe you have seen one, and that's okay. You could talk about it then. But if you haven't seen one, don't say what you don't know, because that muddles up the whole conversation.
Tell us again, where can people find you?
peterpanagore.love